Welcome to Narrative Responsibility, a podcast about examining the meta-story of your life, how well it is serving you, and how to change it for the better. I'm Elena Wolf, relationship coach and life alignment mentor, and this is this week's New Perspective. Hi there! I'm so glad you're here today. This is episode 25. The Cast Irons of Samwise. All right, so this is a bit of a follow-up to last week's episode about doing shadow work and thinking of our personal shadow as potentially a trip to Mordor, where the shadows lie. And also where, all the cool monsters are and Sauron's all-seeing, fiery gaze of doom that does not allow you to keep lying to yourself and all that. It was a more complicated analogy than just the pun, I promise. Anyway, I thought, it might be cool to have an episode about what sorts of tools you can carry with you while you're doing shadow work, sort of like the metaphorical cast iron pans that our friend Samwise Gamgee carries with him into Mordor so that he can still cook some bangin' meals and keep everybody fed and nurtured and strong enough to push through and get to the other side, right? It's kind of important. So what sorts of tools might we be able to have to carry with us and use when we need them on that kind of journey? And I guess I also maybe wanted to talk a little bit more about how it feels, just in the sense of how does it feel in our body to be doing that kind of work, because it's directly related to the reasons that we need at least some of the tools that we need. So yeah, that's what we're here to do. All right. So when we are confronted with something that we have been avoiding seeing, whether we have been suppressing it or whether it's a part of ourself that hasn't really had a chance to develop, something that we have relegated to the shadow, it basically is a shift in our egoic identity. The container of our ego has to break open a little bit and take in some new territory and then integrate that new territory into our sense of self, our understanding of who we are and how we feel. So when this happens, it can be either a little or a lot unsettling, depending on how much kind of came in all at once, and possibly also what was the tone of the content. Was it just something like, oh, I didn't realize I had that capacity in myself too, which is relatively benign? Or was it like, oh, wow, I have to completely rewrite my understanding of my own story because this information changes everything, which is a lot bigger and a lot more unsettling. So what happens when this is going on is that we tend to feel a little bit adrift. We've lost the neural network that feels like our sense of home, our sense of self, because new connections are being made or old ones are being removed or routed around. And so this can kind of leave us with a sense of displacement, and we can't quite find our feet in the world because we can't quite find our feet inside our own web of neural connections. Depending on how much is changing, or again, if there's also a lot of emotional reaction or discomfort coming up, it can feel really uncomfortable in our physical body too. We can feel scared. We can feel vulnerable. We can feel lost. We can feel like we're undefended, open, but not in a way that feels safe. Like have basically taken off our armor and, stood in front of the Nazgul, not like where we might not have armor on, but we feel like there's no threat in the room. And sometimes it can be like a sensation of falling or breathlessness, or maybe you can't see me because I don't record in video. I am moving my hand up and down like a sine wave or like a wave. What is that? What is that verb? Maybe a rocking motion or like a roller coaster kind of feeling that, up and down. And it's not, you're not staying in one place. You feel something moving inside of yourself, but the world is not moving. And maybe you're not even moving in the world. Maybe you're sitting down and you still feel this. And oh, that is intense. That is uncomfortable. Yeah. And also that sort of discomfort is sometimes why we find ourselves avoiding looking at shadow stuff, because that feeling scares us. That sense of being unsettled is frightening. We don't like it. We crave certainty. We crave homeostasis. We like to keep things the same. We like to stay balanced. And trying to gain our balance in the outer world is often much easier than trying to regain balance in our inner world. So like if we're spinning out on the inside, it's like we can't even find a safe point of reference on the outside sometimes. So yeah, that's kind of what's happening on like a physiological level, or maybe like a emotional body level, which is how we're feeling our emotions manifested in our physical body. So what is it that we can do about this? What can we use to hold on to a sense of stability or a sense of self as the fabric of our reality, of our inner reality, is being unwoven and then reshaped, rewoven into a different picture, into a different story? Well, there are, I think, 3 different categories of tools that we can carry. So maybe one of them's a big stew pot, and one of them's a big cast iron, and one of them's, I don't know, a small cast iron, a vegetable pot. Yeah. You pick what cooking pots and pans you prefer, and that's your 3 categories. So the first one is mindset work. The second is stories and inspirations, and the third is physical grounding exercises, somatic practices. Okay, so going in order of those 3, mindset work. There are, I guess, 3 in particular sort of perspectives that I have personally found very useful in this kind of work. One is maintaining a beginner's mindset. This is essentially maintaining a sense of openness to the experience you are having without an expectation of performance on yourself. And this can be a really powerful way of getting around the voice in our head that tells us we should be able to do this by this age, or we should know better, or we should have had experiences that taught us this. We should. If you didn't, you didn't. So it doesn't matter what should have happened. It didn't happen. That's not where you are. But a beginner's mindset allows you to bypass that and simply say, well, what am I experiencing? And if I don't expect myself to have any capacity to perform because I am a beginner at this, then even failure is going to be a good teacher. And any experimentation will give me insight so I can be free of performance expectations and simply be curious, go explore, go experience, go discover. Another perspective that I found really helpful is what I call breathing into the fear. And that is essentially acknowledging that whatever it is that I'm experiencing is new. It's something that I haven't known before. It's something that I haven't experienced before. And if I feel apprehension about the unknown or uncertainty about what I'm trying to do, then I can allow that feeling. I can breathe into that fear and say, okay, I feel afraid, and because fear is never going to go away just because you try to pretend it's not there. So if, for example, a beginner's mindset is not enough to make you not afraid of the unknown, then you just allow it to be there with you. You simply don't allow it to hold you back. You make it an and rather than an or. So instead of saying, either I can be afraid or I can act, you say, I can be afraid and I can still act. Fear shouldn't prevent me from taking action. Fear should not prevent me from moving forward onto this new path. You just acknowledge that it's there and you think through what might make you feel safer, what might help you reduce the fear enough that you can overcome it or that you won't be in distress. Maybe thinking of what you want and what you're moving toward so that becomes more exciting and something that's more valuable than staying safe or staying the same. Is it kind of getting down to the nitty gritty of what is it you're actually afraid of so you can then kind of make counter plans or, do something that takes that fear away. And then you say, okay, now I'm deliberately going to take this action. Now I'm deliberately going to take this different path, even in the face of fear, and see what comes. And the final piece of mindset that I think is really helpful is radical self-compassion. This is helpful in dealing with fear, by the way, because it's basically a refusal to abandon yourself. Radical self-compassion is about seeing yourself with kindness and seeing yourself not with the eyes of judgment, but with the eyes of acceptance. Even if you can't use the word love just yet. Some people on a healing journey find it very difficult to go from being deeply self-rejecting to deeply self-loving. But you can still be compassionate toward yourself. You can still accept where you are and that you are in a process of trying to change that to be where you want to be. But there's no reason to self-reject just because you're not there yet. If you can simply allow yourself to be where you are and say, I'm going to choose kindness. Kindness always. I'm going to speak to myself kindly. And I am going to stay with myself. I'm going to stay present with myself, even in hard times, because that's the kind thing to do. That is the compassionate thing to do, rather than splitting off my awareness or suppressing, my awareness of that uncomfortable emotion or something like that. Just stay with yourself. Allow that emotion to exist in your body and allow yourself to feel it. Just choose to stay with yourself. Choose to stay present with yourself. This is not necessarily easy, especially if you have had experiences where your body feels unsafe, even feeling emotions. It can be a whole process to get there. So, if that's too much for you, then this is not the pot that you need to be working with, and that's fine. That's why we have 3. So those are the mindsets that I think are really helpful to keep in mind if you're doing shadow work. The beginner's mindset, breathing into the fear, radical self-compassion. In terms of the stories we can carry with us, in this case, it's actually less metaphorical than I usually mean stories. When I'm talking about, it's all the beliefs or all the perspectives that you have. Those are all stories. Those are all lenses we look through. Like, no. I mean, like literal stories. Human beings love stories. We love hearing stories about other people. We learn from stories because we can imagine them, we can see them, we feel things about them. Children who read a lot often have higher empathy than children who don't in adulthood. Because one of the things that fiction does is it puts us into the perspective of another person. Like, we get to see this deep perspective view behind their eyes. We feel their feelings with them. we imagine ourselves walking that same path that they walked. And because of that, we can learn from stories that we hear. We can learn from watching people, kind of seeing the story that they're living out. That can be very inspiring for us. It can create, sort of motivation to hold on. It can create a belief that what we're trying to do is possible. And often having that awareness that it's even possible is a catalyst for trying to make it happen. Like a non-appealing example, I guess, would be the 4-minute mile or the under 4-minute mile. Like for a long time, people believed that no human could run a mile faster than 4 minutes. After the first person broke that record and ran a mile in just under 4 minutes, then all of a sudden, a bunch of people could do it because it had been shown to be possible. And so suddenly there was a motivation to try that hadn't been there before because it was just this accepted belief that that's not possible. So in the personal development world, an example might be the statement that, like, you're never finished healing. And I don't think that's true. I think that we can get to a place where we have recovered our losses and we have integrated our experiences. Yes, they will still have left marks on us. You can't make it so they didn't happen, but you can make it so that you're not still in phases of developmental arrest or not still suppressing pieces of your history that you simply can't bring yourself to face. But if you have this narrative that that's not possible, well, then why would you even try? Like, why unpack any of it at all if it's going to be super uncomfortable and there's not going to be an end point to it? I think I'm just going to go back to suppressing it. Let them hobbits go to Mordor without me. Peace. Not naming names here, Denethor, but Anyway, how nerdy can I get? An Elena story. So yeah, stories. You can find stories of people, whether we're talking in fiction or, anecdotes of people in your life, whether it's famous people, historical figures, current celebrities. You can find someone who has done something similar or been through a similar experience, or maybe they've been through something worse and you're like, oh man, if they could pull out of that, I can pull out of this. Like, whatever kind of story you need that can help you feel motivated and inspired to keep going and have that sense that you're not the only one who's been through something like this, and that there are ways, out of it, that you can maybe copy what they tried and see if it works for you. It can give you some ideas, or it can simply maybe give you the emotional motivation, like, okay, I can be strong like so-and-so was strong. That's who I want to be. That's who I choose to be. I can do this. So yeah, if you're struggling with, some aspect of shadow work, whether that's recovery or whether that's integrating this new understanding of the world, or whether that's just finding this new part of yourself and you don't really know what to do with it, do some research, find some stories, find some book tropes or some, Netflix themes, or just a good old Google search might bring you some interesting results. And you can kind of see, are there stories that can inspire me? Is there anything that I can find to help show me the way forward or remind me that it's possible? So that's the stories. And the final piece, the third of our 3 cast irons, is somatic practices, grounding practices. So these have a variety of forms, which I guess makes sense because our physical bodies have a variety of senses and needs. Some of it is going to be as simple as moving or breathing. Breath work can be specific exercises, whether this is breath holding or controlled breathing, where you're breathing in a set rhythm or on certain times. So it can be a formal practice, but breath work can also simply be as simple as tuning into your breath like putting your attention on it without any intent to change it, but simply to change the focus of your thoughts and attention to your breathing so that you can set aside your brain for a while and simply be with your body. Be in that moment. Or, maybe your breath work is something much more complex and formalized, and either's fine. Body work or movement could be something as simple as walking, and it could be something as complex as yoga sets or dancing, just whatever helps you get in touch with your body and to feel your body in space and to burn off some of the energy that you might have. It can also be engaging your proprioceptive sense, which is your sense of your body in space. So balancing and having deliberate and or forced awareness of your body with respect to the things around it. Having awareness of gravity, that kind of thing, can definitely help with that floaty feeling and that sense of falling. But there's also things like touch, like scent, like food. For a lot of people, food can be very comforting, and it can be a reminder of aliveness, especially if you're engaging in like a mindful eating practice. It can also sort of be a mindless kind of escapism, if you're just numbing out with calories, with sugar, with substance. So I don't want to be encouraging that, but taking the time to prepare yourself like a really nourishing, healthy meal and then enjoy it and actually be present to it, like that can be incredibly life affirming and can really help ground you into the now moment and a sense of safety. Maybe sitting with a cup of warm tea or warm coffee in your hand and just engaging with the warmth of it and the scent of it and the ritual of it, that sort of thing. Scent can also be very comforting, whether this is, deliberately putting yourself in contact with flowers, whether this is using candles or oil diffusers, whether it's perfume. I personally love using scent as a way to add sensory beauty to my day. It is something that I have control over. I have control over whether I wear perfume. If I'm not choosing perfume, but like a candle or something like that, I can choose which one I light. I can control the environment around me and make sure that it has something comforting or something that fits the tone of my energy that day, or something that helps me feel a little safer or a little more supported or a little more joyful. With touch, this can be things like affectionate touch from a friend or a lover or a pet. It can be massage. It can even be self-touch. How do you touch your own body? Do you use kindness? Do you use gentleness? Or do you even notice, when you do? Like if you're getting dressed or if you're drying off after a bath or a shower or something like that, how do you touch yourself? Is it just kind of perfunctory, get it over with as quickly as possible, I'm not even paying attention? Or do you actually take the time to check in with yourself and have a moment of self-nurturing while you're doing that care task? A lot of people who are doing healing work probably have a somewhat fraught relationship with their body because emotions happen in the body. And if you had anything happen where you needed to suppress that memory or that emotion because it was too much for you to feel at the time, that lingers in your body, that energy and the memory of that experience, the memory of that feeling of overwhelm and fear and maybe pain. We feel our emotions in our body. And so a lot of people in Western culture live in a slightly dissociated state from our body because really we're trying to stay out of our emotional body, but it's the same body. And so if your body feels unsafe for you to be in, then simply having small-scale reminders of your physical self in a way that you control and that feels good for you is a really great start at rebuilding that relationship. For one person, that might be walking. For another person, that might actually be really vigorous exercise. For one person, that might simply be holding their hands around a cup of tea, and the only part of their body they can actually tune into in that moment is their hands and the warmth and the weight. That's okay. That's a start. It's better than nothing. Do what you can, take what works, and leave the rest. It's always my policy. So that kind of somatic awareness and body awareness and mindfulness is our third cast iron. So hopefully, you're able to carry one or all of them or some combination of them with you, and to kind of keep these tools in mind. As with cast irons, the more you use them, the more seasoning they acquire, the better things taste out of them. So the more you use any of these tools just in your daily life. When I say daily life, I don't necessarily mean literally every day, but, just going about your life, not only in times of crisis, that actually means that if you hit a crisis point, you're going to have tools that fit in your hand like it's part of your hand, that you know how to work with in and out, and you're very comfortable with. Even though my own recent trip to the Shadowlands was definitely bleak and scary, the reason it didn't actually pull me into any kind of severe distress or depressive episode or something like that is that I have, at this point, 8 years of developing my relationship with these tools. So there was a lot of experiences that I have to draw on from past times that things have come up that unsettled me or frightened me, but also the fact that on a daily basis, I make a point to be kind to myself. I make a point to live from a beginner's mindset. I make a point to choose action regardless of fear, without telling myself that I'm wrong for any fears that I have or shaming myself for them. So, yeah. There you have it. You can walk into Mordor too, just like Samwise, with a backpack full of cooking utensils and the ability to nurture yourself no matter what Sauron's throwing at you. So, hope this was helpful, and I hope it made sense. I appreciate you taking this walk with me, regardless. I hope it didn't feel quite as long as the walk from the Shire to Mordor. And hopefully next week we can move on to something a little bit lighter and, I don't know, more spring-like. But in the meantime, if you want to know more about my work as a coach, you can check out thepatternbreaker.com. Free guided trip to Mordor with with every engagement. You can follow me on Instagram at thepatternbreaker. If you want to support the podcast, you can leave me a rating and review, or check out patreon.com/narrative responsibility for the cool perks I offer to my subscribers. And until next time, what part of your story are you going to take responsibility for this week?